Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories. This is episode 28. Let the nightmare begin. The Secret in the Cellar. Speak louder, please. I put my hand up next to my ear from the back of the room, signaling that she would need to raise her voice. She took a deep breath. I could see anxiety turning her cheeks beet red as strands of blonde hair began to fall out of the same nappy ponytail she wore every day. There was something about her so familiar, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. With her face glued to the paper, too afraid to make eye contact, she quickly sputtered out, "Hi, my name is Lily Evans, and this is my poem called My Family." Lily was a shy little girl. In fact, she was one of the quietest students I ever had in my 10 years of teaching, which I guess being the youngest of 11 will do that to anyone. Surprisingly, she was very smart, unlike the rest of her siblings who were dumber than a box of rocks. Lord, the Evans kids were such a headache, except for Lily, of course. I just wish I could have given her more opportunities to improve her future. Don't get me wrong, I tried to help Lily, I really did. I gave her clothes, food, and even had funds lined up for her. But living dirt poor in a shack out in the middle of the desert was a bad hand to be dealt in life. Besides, no matter what I did, it wouldn't have made a difference. Everyone knows that the cycle of poverty is almost impossible to break. I crossed my legs, pen in hand, preparing for yet another bland story about a family I'd never get to meet. If you've ever worked with underprivileged kids, you'd know that guardian involvement is quite rare. When it came to interest in their daughter's education, Lily's parents were no exception. I have two mommies. One named Sarah, who can make good spaghetti. I call her Mom. She's the one that's married to my dad, Mark. One named Amelia, with pretty yellow hair. I call her Mommy. Dad calls her his project, his hobby. Being smack dab in the middle of Utah, I've seen hundreds of polygamous families, so this didn't strike me as odd. Besides, even though polygamy is illegal, I try to keep my nose in my own business. Mom takes care of us all. She can do that because she's so tall. Mommy wears a pretty silver bracelet. She wears it because she's so famous. Wouldn't be the first time I saw kids coming up with stories about celebrity parents to add excitement to their ordinary lives. I just didn't expect it to come from Lily. Mommy has me and Leo. He's one of my older brothers. Mom is a lot older. She has all the others. I cringed. That meant that one of Lily's mothers had given birth to 9 children. I couldn't imagine going through that many pregnancies. Dad says me and Leo are a gift from God. He'll never hit us with a rod. His pride and joy is Leo, but he says the only person he truly loves is Mommy. I looked up from my grade book with the line about a rod catching my attention. However, this wasn't the first time one of my students had accidentally reported abuse. Truth is CPS picks and chooses who they want to help. Mom is having another baby. She's mad Dad wants to name it Daisy. Mommy can't have no more kids. Her last one died of SIDS. Shifting in my seat, I scribbled down a note reminding myself to deliver my daughter's old baby clothes to the Evans shack. As a mother myself, I know babies can be expensive. Dad says she did it on purpose because she wanted to run off and join the circus. Mom says it wasn't her fault. I promised to keep that secret in the me and her vault. I shook my head in sadness. How could someone blame a grieving mother for something she couldn't control? Mommy was the one Dad chose. He watched all of her school shows. They were joined in the night. Daddy says inside her is a lot of fight. Mom is just a cover. Dad doesn't really love her. I threw my hand up, a gesture meaning stop. I had taught my students, but Lily didn't look up. She continued to read, oblivious to my disappointed frown. Obviously, one of her siblings put her up to this as a joke. Mommy says she needs to get out. She wants to show me what life is all about. Dad gets mad. It's his biggest pet peeve. Mommy is sad. She just wants to leave. Mommy sings to me her favorite song. Mom says Dad's head is wired wrong. Shaking my head, I sighed. Another child with so much potential and such a kind heart was stuck in the middle of a lover's quarrel that didn't even involve her. Last birthday, I wanted to take Mommy to see her favorite basketball team. Mom made me a cake with frosted buttercream. I got to go see the Knicks, but Dad said he made a mistake he couldn't fix. Nothing is the same anymore. I don't know why for sure. Now Dad cries at night alone. He asks God, what have I done? To Mom, he no longer tends. She hopes the baby will make amends. Lily rose her head up with a smile, looking for my approval. Although I was appalled at the inappropriateness of her poem, I didn't want to break her spirits. She clearly was very proud of it, and scolding her for something that wasn't her wrongdoing was just going to send that little girl back in her shell that I've been trying to break for months. So instead, I clapped, making the rest of the class, who were too young to understand the gravity of the situation, applaud too. Mrs. Davis, I brought a picture of Mommy for extra credit. It's got one more part of the poem. Can I show the class? I nodded my head, thinking there couldn't possibly be any details worse than what she already presented. Lily reached into the front pocket on her old worn-out hand-me-down dress, pulling out an old, aging photo. She flipped the flaking picture around, displaying it as if it were her most prized possession. My blood ran cold. I finally figured out why Lily looked so familiar to me. In what seemed to be a school photograph, smiling ear to ear exactly like Lily, was a young woman by the name of Amelia Rose. She was a high school student, popular for her ability to gain the lead in every school play that went missing without a trace 12 years prior. She was last seen leaving theater practice late one night, but then she just vanished. No sign of a struggle, no witnesses, no evidence, no body, nothing. Her case was covered on every news station in Utah for a while because of how peculiar it was until people lost interest. Lily happily continued. I was so in shock I couldn't stop her as she read off the back of the picture. There is one thing I don't understand, and maybe you'll have the answer at hand. If Dad's love for Mommy will never sway, why did he treat her that way? Mom lays her head on a nice soft bed, but Mommy sleeps in the basement under a big slab of cement. The 25th Hour Café. Late one night, I found myself driving down what seemed like an endless stretch of road. I was on my way back from a week-long business trip, facing at least a 12-hour drive home. Having always been scared of flying, the monotonous trek was unavoidable. Though tedious and sometimes downright soul-crushing, I'd grown used to the lonely road trips back and forth from state to state. In an effort to minimize my commute, I usually refrained from making pit stops. I would push through exhaustion and discomfort, making my way home in one fell swoop. I would then enter my bedroom and meet my blankets with a hard thud, falling asleep almost immediately after my head hit the pillow. Picturing my eventual slumber is what kept my foot on the gas pedal. On this drive, however, I grew particularly hungry. I tried to ignore the feeling, but this became increasingly difficult as the night went on. I found myself longing for sustenance, fantasizing about dreadful gas station food, anything that would placate my insatiable late-night hunger. I was between a rock and a hard place, as tightly squished as one could be. Unable to fight off the urge to eat any longer, I gave into my stomach's groaning and got off the highway somewhere in Massachusetts. I had been to the state on several occasions, but this time I was in unfamiliar territory. There were many trees, more than the average Cape Side town. On top of that, there were no buildings in sight. Despite the lack of residential growth, I was sure I could sniff out a convenience store and indulge in a microwave burrito or a slice of rubbery pizza. I drove on for what must have been 30 minutes or so. No gas stations, no fast food joints, no buildings of any kind. Just miles and miles of wooded area. Worst of all, I didn't even have a phone signal to pull up my GPS. I was just about to give up on Operation Midnight Snack when I saw a faint glow off in the distance. This signaled to me that I must have been reaching the outskirts of civilization. Furthermore, it meant nourishment was just around the corner. As I approached the glimmering light, I realized it was that of a large neon sign. Coming closer, I was able to make out what it said. The 25th Hour Café, followed by an even larger subheading. Open 25 hours a day. I guess that they really wanted to drive the "we never close" angle home, and in a cheeky manner no less. Cheekier and larger still, there was a big flashing arrow beneath the sign, pointing to the diner in question. Hungry as ever, I pulled in without hesitation. I jumped out of my car and rushed toward the entrance, but not before taking a quick look at the place. It was a beautiful, retro-themed, silver boxcar diner. The smooth metal exterior gleamed in the moonlight as I walked up. It was so sleek and well-crafted that I wondered why it was located in the middle of nowhere. Could they really get by on the odd passerby here and there? After admiring the diner's craftsmanship, I barged in, intent on satisfying my late-night case of the munchies. The diner was void of life, but I heard a voice yell out from the kitchen, "Be right there." While I waited for service, I surveyed my surroundings. A gorgeous, red checkerboard pattern painted the interior of the building. Lining the perimeter were red booths and tables so immaculate, they looked as though they'd never been touched by human hands. To top it all off, there was a row of similarly red, identical cushioned bar stools at the counter. The diner definitely had a classic 50s vibe to it, but it was too crisp and clean to feel truly authentic. After a few minutes of waiting, a middle-aged man came out from the kitchen, drying his hands with a dish rag. "Hello there. Welcome to the 25th Hour Café. My name is Morris, and I'll be your server tonight. How can I help you?" Morris wore a retro, soda jerk cap, a comically large bow tie, a spotless white apron, and a smile almost too wide for his face. He pointed up at the large menu on the wall behind him, where I noticed quirky food items like the Milky Way shake, Galaxy sliders, and Planet fries. "Yeah, I'll have whatever the special is." I didn't feel like asking him to translate the menu for me. Plus, I didn't really care what I was eating so long as my stomach stopped growling. The Nebula Express, coming right up. Morris shot me another awkwardly wide smile. To escape his eager glare, I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen. Still no signal, but I noticed that it was approaching midnight. I groaned a bit, knowing that my detour had cost me a swift return home. Still, I knew I couldn't ignore my biological needs any longer. I would have ended up stopping at some point anyway. I put my phone in my pocket and looked back up at the counter. Morris was still there, smiling away. Shouldn't you be getting my order?" He didn't react to my query. Instead, he remained silent and motionless. "Okay then, I'm gonna leave now. Bye." Just as I turned around to head for the door, Morris spoke up. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "Why is that?" I asked. "Well, it would be a waste of time." I turned back and glared at him. "What are you talking about? Are you gonna go get my food or not?" He laughed at me. "You can't leave now. The fun is just about to begin. Your order is being prepared as we speak. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." Morris pulled out a stopwatch from his apron. The digital readout appeared to be counting backward from an hour. I didn't know if it was a restaurant gimmick or a strange prank at my expense, but either way, I was fed up. "Bye, Morris. It's been weird. Thanks for nothing." I turned around and continued marching toward the exit. As I did this, my jaw dropped. The door was gone. My eyes quickly darted from left to right, revealing to me that the windows had vanished as well. There was nothing but continuous wall on either side of me. Perplexed, I looked back to Morris. He chuckled to himself, then asked me a question. "So, how do you like your meat?" "What?" I asked, completely dazed. "Your meat. How do you like it?" Well done." "I like it well done." "Well done, huh?" "I like my meat as red as possible. A little color does the body good." I looked at him, confused. "Morris, where's the door?" "Well, let's just say it's temporarily unavailable. Anything else I can help you with?" "Yeah, what the hell is going on here?" "Well, there are a number of possibilities. I've outlined them here on the menu." Morris pointed up at the menu again, only this time, the food items were gone. The letters had seemingly been rearranged to form bullet points numbered 1 to 3. I read them aloud. 1. During your business trip, one of your colleagues slipped you some LSD as part of a half-hearted practical joke. What you're experiencing now is a product of the drug's potent, hallucinogenic properties. I like that one, Morris said. Unlikely, but it's fun, wouldn't you say? I moved on to the next possibility. 2. You fell asleep at the wheel. This is merely a vivid dream that will continue until you inevitably crash your car and die on impact. Alternatively, you may have already crashed your car and lived, albeit barely. You are currently in a coma, and your sleeping mind has formed a narrative based on the hunger you felt before the accident. The diner is a metaphor for the coma itself, and you won't escape until you awaken, which may very well be never. Morris bore a look of concern. A little morbid, I admit, but it is possible. I reluctantly looked at the last option. 3. Something supernatural is afoot. Mysterious forces beyond your comprehension are at play, trapping you in an otherwise normal eatery. These forces will not allow you to leave under any circumstances. The best thing you can do is accept this and allow yourself to succumb to whatever classic, paranormal tropes are thrown your way. Death will be your only escape. That's all I could come up with, Morris said. I'm not sure myself, but I'm leaning towards number 3. What the hell, Morris? What the fuck is this? And shouldn't you of all people know? You would think so, wouldn't ya? But I guess I wouldn't tell you if I did now, would I? He offered me another one of his smiles as a consolation. I want to punch it clean off his face. Instead, I partook in a nervous breakdown of sorts. I slammed my body up against the wall where the door had been. I screamed at the top of my lungs. And I even grabbed a few bar stools and tossed them in different directions, as hard as my arms would allow. All the while, Morris remained calm and still, his lips stretched from ear to ear. Just as I was about to take a swing at him, the kitchen door behind him popped open. "Oh, your order must be ready. Please come with me." Morris disappeared into the darkness beyond the kitchen's door frame. I stayed behind, hesitant to follow him. After a few moments, I heard him yell out to me, "Come on, kid. Aren't you hungry?" It's true, I was hungry, but I was more so cautious, especially given my peculiar situation. Because of this, I sat down in one of the booths and waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for exactly, but it was all I could bring myself to do at that very moment. It wasn't long before I heard Morris's voice again. "You can't wait out there forever, kid." As if in response to his statement, the lights in the diner began to flicker. Then, one by one, they went out, spreading darkness from booth to booth. Eventually, I was left with just one bulb above me, wavering in and out of life. It provided me with just enough light to make my way to the kitchen, and Morris knew it. I had 2 choices: go to the dark kitchen, or let the bulb go out and sit in the dark diner. Neither option was ideal, but deep down I knew only one had the potential to lead me to answers, no matter which one of the far-fetched scenarios on the menu was true. As such, I gave in to the narrative that was unfolding around me. It was clear to me at this point that fighting it was futile. As I passed the threshold into the kitchen, the door shut itself behind me. Bright light poured out from the ceiling, washing over the entire room, revealing vibrant white walls and flooring. In the center of the room was a chair, slanted in a diagonal position, not unlike one you'd find in a dentist's office. Next to the chair was Morris, who had traded in his diner uniform for a flashy white lab coat. "Finally, come, sit down, take a load off." If only out of fear for what might happen next if I disobeyed, I did as Morris told me. It's not like I had much of a choice at that point. I slowly walked over to the chair and laid down. As I did this, leather straps wrapped themselves around my legs, arms, and forehead. I no longer had the luxury of movement or peripheral vision. Morris walked around to the front of the chair and pulled out his stopwatch. "You're doing fine, kid. Only 40 minutes left." Without warning, 6 or 7 shadowy figures came rushing over from either side of me. They brought with them rolling carts filled with what looked like medical equipment and power tools. I tried to make out even a single face in the crowd, but I could not. They lacked discernible features of any kind. and moved about in perfect harmony with one another, like animated silhouettes, doing the bidding of some unseen higher power. Over the course of the next few minutes, the figures poked and prodded me, drew blood, took hair samples, and inserted their utensils in places I rather not discuss. As much as I squirmed and screamed, none of them reacted, not even Morris. Feeling helpless, I eventually stopped struggling and simply braced myself for each needle that penetrated my skin. It made things a little more tolerable. After a while, the figures stopped. Instead of going away like I'd hoped they would, they traded their needles and test tubes for surgical scissors and began cutting my clothes off of me. This continued until I was completely naked. I tried talking to Morris, but he was too busy playing around with the samples that had been collected. Even if he did respond, no amount of encouragement could have prepared me for what happened next. Using nothing but scalpels and brute strength, the figures began cutting away at my skin. It was an absolutely horrific orchestra of deadly incisions, and one that continued until they peeled off every last bit of my epidermis. For one reason or another, I remained both alive and awake during the entire ordeal, though at the time I wished I could have died. The pain was excruciating and came in waves. Just when I thought I was going numb, another unbearable, sharp, throbbing sensation would overtake my entire body. I'd never felt anything like it before. By the end of it, my ears were ringing from the volume of my own screams. "There's that color," Morris exclaimed, gazing at the bloody mess that I'd become. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled. "I'm not doing anything, kid. I'm just here to observe. Relax. Only 27 minutes left." I would have argued with him further, but the figures grabbed the power tools and started tearing through my muscle tissue. The buzzing sound of saws filled the room, drowning out my cries of agony. Through blood-soaked eyes, I could see Morris mouthing the words, "Tick-tock, tick-tock," over and over again. I watched him mock me until the buzzing stopped, and the next stage of torture commenced. I never wanted to see my organs. I never wanted to see my bone. I could have gone my whole life without knowing what they looked like. Now I can't get the image of them out of my head. I'm afraid I never will. After successfully ripping apart my skin and muscles, the shadowy demons took hammers to my insides, smashing on my spleen, stomach, liver, kidneys, and lungs. They broke through the brittle, white ivory that made up my skeleton, making sure to leave no bone unturned. They even destroyed my skull and scooped my brain matter into jars. After all was said and done, they cleaned up my remains like fallen hair in a barber shop and swiftly left the room. You're probably wondering how I lived. I'm not entirely sure. They stripped away every physical aspect of my being, but I was still there, a sort of bubble of floating consciousness. I could still see and hear, but I was without a material body. As jarring as this realization was, I was just happy to no longer be in pain. I didn't realize it, but Morris was still in the room. He walked over to me and leaned in real close, stopwatch in hand. "See? Now that wasn't so bad, was it? And looky here, you've only got 18 minutes left. How will you spend them? What things will you see? We had our fun. Now it's your turn." Morris turned around and walked out the kitchen door, leaving me alone in the white room. Within an instant, things began to change around me. The walls, floor, and ceiling faded, revealing an array of distant stars behind them. I somehow went from being in a diner on planet Earth to floating around in the vacuum of space within mere moments. Within seconds of the room completely fading from view, I was unwillingly hurled through the universe at light speed. Everything around me blurred, and my bodiless soul spun around uncontrollably. If I still had a stomach, it would have been turning. I'll never forget what I experienced in the coming moments, but I'll never fully remember it either. Even now, I only have access to bits and pieces of what happened. Perhaps the extreme velocity in which I traveled somehow damaged the fragile fabric of my memory, rendering me unable to retain the information I was presented with. Or maybe my feeble mind just couldn't process the imagery. Who knows? In truth, I can only tell you what I felt. That will never go away. As I sped through deep space, I was stopped in specific locations, mostly foreign planets and dead star systems. In these moments, I saw unspeakable things, gruesome things, things I never knew could exist in the universe. I was plagued with disturbing sights and concepts of horrific proportions, so horrendous in fact, it made my impromptu autopsy look tame in comparison. I don't know exactly what it was I saw out there, but I still feel an immense dread whenever I try to recall it. After what felt like an eternity of torture, I was transported to what I can only assume was a location outside of the observable universe. There were no stars or any light to speak of, not even off in the distance. I was alone in a blanket of darkness, left to suffer with the memories of what I'd endured. Just as I was beginning to accept my circumstances, a light glow appeared in the distance. As it came closer to my position, I recognized its features. It was Morris's stopwatch. The readout was approaching 0. 10, 9, 8. I started to feel weary, almost like I was falling into a deep sleep. I wondered if that was even possible in my current state. 7, 6, 5. Like a projected movie, the past hour of my life appeared on the black canvas of space behind the stopwatch. It played in reverse at high speed, like a VHS tape stuck on rewind. 4, 3, 2. Feeling faint, I tried to focus on the imagery. I relived everything that happened to me in the diner within a few mere seconds. 1, 0, and poof. Just like that, I was back in the diner parking lot, body and flesh intact. My car was there next to me, right where I parked it. I took out my phone and checked the time. It was 12:01. Everything had returned to normal, somehow, to the way it was before. Elated, I jumped into my car and started it up. I was about to drive off like a bat out of hell, but I decided to take one last look at the diner. Somehow, within its walls, there does exist an extra hour in the day. How that's possible and what its purpose is, I can't be certain. Maybe Morris was right, and that third scenario had something to do with it. The only thing I do know is that I survived, and I won't be making another pit stop anytime soon, no matter how hungry I may be. Just then, before my very eyes, the diner lifted itself from its foundation and flew upwards into the night sky. The silence next door? I moved into my apartment complex 2 months ago. I started hearing things a week later. It was subtle at first. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up to a faint scratching sound from somewhere behind the walls. I thought it could be mice or rats. I have lived through enough shitty one-bedroom apartments in Manhattan to recognize the signs. Small little turds on the floor, tiny holes in plaster, an unending scratching that sounds like 1,000 little feet marching to the beat of my headache. My symptoms fit the bill. It had to be a mouse, and so I put out traps. I invested in a little steel wool. The internet says the best way to catch a rat is peanut butter. I slathered spoonfuls of the stuff all over a fresh tomcat trap. Amazon's best. I went to bed with the expectation that a fat rodent would be dead in my living room by the following morning. I laid awake eagerly awaiting their demise. But it rained a lot that night. After I turned off the TV, I tried to listen for the sounds of my furry friends falling for the bait. But the storm overtook almost every sound. Cracks of thunder shook the glassware on my kitchen counter. Water got inside through the cracks and spaces between the window's framing. I had to put a towel down. The dripping started to annoy me more than the rats ever did in the first place. But somewhere underneath it all, I heard something else. Something a lot more frightening than rats. A voice whispering, "Help me." I never really believed in the paranormal. I told people that a lot. I never saw signs or spirits like everybody else. Part of my subconscious felt like maybe this was my comeuppance. The ghosts on the street had heard me talking shit, and now they were going to come for me. Maybe just to show me who was boss, so to speak. And I had nothing for protection. Nobody to verify my experiences. I lived alone in the middle of a lightly occupied skyrise. A demon or poltergeist could fuck with me all they wanted. And so I pulled the sheets up to my chin while the scratching started to overtake the storm along with my rationality. The constant repetition of "help me" floated further through the walls. She started to get louder, more urgent. My fear-paralyzed mind told me that she was getting closer. I knew that was impossible, but I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed and marched out of my apartment, nearly stepping on the unoccupied rat trap myself. The building kept a guard on desk duty throughout the night. He needed to know about the voice. I hopped in the elevator with sweatpants and no socks. When it opened on the ground level, a surprise security guard waited for me behind the desk. "Sir, are you okay? Can you check if the apartment next to me is occupied?" The tall Hispanic man furrowed his brow worriedly as he eyed my evening wear with distaste. He wore an official-looking blue button shirt with black slacks and a radio clipped to the belt. "We really should not divulge. Somebody's been screaming, 'Help me,' all night. I think they are in trouble, but I have never seen anyone go in there." The man looked worried as he pounded into the small laptop placed on the desk. "Okay, what apartment number?" 522. "We haven't rented many units up there since we took over." That's what I said. "Yep, 522 and 524 are empty. You have one other tenant at the other end of your floor. Maybe you heard his television. The walls here are very thin, sir, and we're actively working on the rodent issue. I think we need to call the police." The man flashed a smile that made the goosebumps on my skin slide up like candy dots. Like he was prepared for the accusation. Like he knew something that I didn't. His cool expression placated onto such ordinary features made my stomach turn uncomfortably. "Like I said, the apartment is empty. Would you like to go and see for yourself?" "I would." My willing response definitely took him aback. He punched again at the laptop, nervously. I had no idea what he was typing. After a minute's hesitation, he walked past me toward the elevator. "Let's go. 522 first. I've got the key." I followed the guard into the elevator. Something about his demeanor continued to make me cautious. He seemed confident, excited even. At the time, I chalked up the oddity to overinterest in the mystery before us. It's possible some kids broke in, but I doubt it. These locks are pretty secure. "I still think you heard a neighbor." I nodded wordlessly. When the doors opened again, we marched together down the hall toward apartment 522. I waited patiently while he opened the lock and beckoned me inside. It was empty. Our voices echoed across the recently finished floors and furnitureless void inside the studio apartment. I paced around and checked the nooks and crannies. I waited a couple minutes and listened for the voice. I even called out to it, but nobody answered. The only sound I heard were the steady ricochet of raindrops against the windowsills. Satisfied? We still have 524. My new friend started to look a little less confident. "Look, it's late, and somebody has to watch the desk. Do we need to do this now?" I know what I heard. He stared at me and studied my demeanor for a moment. I shifted awkwardly and tried to appear intimidating. "Okay." The guard once again flashed a friendly smile as he gestured me out into the hallway and locked up behind us. We passed my own apartment on the way towards 524. I thought about going back inside and locking the door. Something about the situation made me squirm, but I didn't. "My name is Logan. By the way, what is your name?" "Evan." "Well, Evan, I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances." I nodded and waited while Logan opened up the door. His casual attitude continued to make me uncomfortable. 524 wasn't empty. Boxes upon boxes were stacked on the floor with neat little labels on each. Spare kitchen chairs made the studio tough to navigate. Once again, Logan waited by the door while I navigated the junk and tried to investigate the other rooms. The small corner kitchen contained the usual boilerplate electronics. The drawers appeared untouched and empty. A thin line of dust formed over the countertops. I moved on to the bathroom and found a recently renovated shower head sparkling against a fresh paint job. I started to get jealous and let my guard down a bit. This place looked nicer than my own. I bet they would be renting it out soon. I was prepared to write the entire thing off as an odd experience before a voice spoke to me inside the bathroom. Help me. It was closer this time, in the same room. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but tried to keep my cool around Logan, who was still outside creeping in the hallway. There was a closet in the bathroom. I opened it. Sitting inside was a teenage girl. She wasn't wearing any clothes. She pushed her knees up to her shoulders and linked her feet together in a sad attempt to remain modest. Sweat poured down her brow. It caused her pretty brown hair to become matted and tangled on her forehead. I covered her mouth and mine after she whispered again. It's him. He did this. Footsteps approached from the hallway. I raised a finger, as if to tell her to wait, and closed the door in the poor girl's face. Then I rushed over to the toilet and flushed the handle. The footsteps stopped. Everything all right in there? Yeah, sorry. Just had to tinkle. This remodel is nice. Gotta get you guys to update my apartment. I opened the door and was immediately greeted by a very suspicious-looking security guard. I've got a leaky window frame. Who can I talk to about that? Logan stared at me for about 30 seconds. At first he looked angry. Then he looked confused. Finally, the suspicion faded from his wrinkled features. Property owner. Not me. I laughed awkwardly and pushed past him. I walked out into the hallway in a rush, never bothering to look behind my shoulder as Logan followed anxiously after. I could hear him locking the door to 524 as I jetted towards my own apartment. You don't want to check anywhere else? I called out something back. I don't remember what. The adrenaline coursed through my veins so quickly that my futile attempts at being casual dissipated the moment I got to my door. I fumbled for the keys in my sweatpants pocket. I clacked them awkwardly against the metal lock. Finally, they found a groove and the door handle turned willingly against my hand. Anything else I can do for you tonight? Logan had caught up to me. He looked suspicious again. I could sense that he might try to stop me. I had to come up with something. Sorry, man. That last trip to the bathroom didn't cut it. Too much chili last night. Gotta go. Logan guffawed over my shoulder as I opened the door and slammed it in his face. I tried to wait a few seconds before applying the chain lock. I waited for his footsteps to fade away first. I didn't want to spook him. Only then I released my hand from the handle and collapsed to the floor. The first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. I have to commend them for the speed. Part of me worried that Logan would try to run. Part of me worried he would go back for the girl. Part of me worried he might try to come after me. He didn't. Police rescued the girl from the bathroom closet. Her name was Chloe. She was 16 years old, and she wasn't the only one. 7 other women were rescued from empty apartments throughout the complex. Each identified Logan as their abductor. Apparently, he kept them drugged and locked inside various rooms inside the building. He returned to visit them every night. Some were tortured, some abused. One was already dead. The house at the end of the lane. Dad, just a few more houses, please, see? Why did I say yes? I blame myself every day, but how could I not? If you saw his face, if you saw those big, beautiful brown eyes staring up at you, I don't see how you could refuse. My son, Leo, dressed as a brave pirate for the second year in a row, pulled and tugged at my hand until I relented. I agreed to just a few more houses, then we go home. Okay? I was weak, spurred on by love. We had finished our 3rd block of houses. His pillow sack was almost full of all sorts of candy, a fact I was reminded of every passing minute as I lugged it around on my back. He had one of those small plastic pumpkin carriers for the front doors, and then he'd run back to me and dump the contents in the pillowcase. Our system was flawless, a perfect combination of teamwork and strategy meant to produce maximum amounts of candy. Those answering the door would see an adorable pirate with an empty bucket, and most of them would add some extra candy bars or gum packets to accommodate the poor little guy. So he didn't need more candy. He was just enjoying the night, an unseasonably warm October after so many years of miserably cold Halloween nights. I couldn't say no. Children only have so many years of trick-or-treating in them, and I wanted him to make the most of each one. We walked down an alleyway to the next block, the last street before the country fields took over. The first house was lit up with orange and white lights, fake spider webs draped over their hedges. He practically sprinted up to the door, not noticing the fake body sitting on the chair. At least I thought it was fake. It started to move. I tried to yell and warn Leo, but the body on the chair already grabbed my son's arm, emitting a howling growl at the same time. Leo, Captain Leo, was unfazed. He even started to laugh. I was so proud of him in that moment. After thanking the woman at the door and wishing her a happy Halloween, he sprinted back to me, excitedly dumping the contents of his conquest into the bulging pillow sack. "Dad, did you see me? I wasn't scared at all. Buddy, you are a champ. If that was me, a little bit of pee would have come out. Bet on it." We shared a laugh together, and he threw his arms around me. It would be the last time either of us would laugh. I looked down at his eyeliner-streaked face, his beautifully crafted hand-sewn pirate hat, courtesy of Mrs., and to my everlasting shame, I said the words that haunt me every day. "Okay, little captain, one more house." There were only 3 more on the street. The 2 beside the house we had just gone to were dark and had no decorations on them. Every child and parent knows this as the universal sign of don't bother coming to my house for candy. So we skipped those 2 and ended up at the house at the end of the road. To his credit, Leo noticed that it also didn't have any decorations, but the front porch light was on. He looked at me, silently asking for my approval. I didn't get a sense that anything was particularly wrong or off about the house. Even though it didn't have any of the lights or spider webs or fake bodies the other houses had. The outside light was on, and we could both see a red and white candy-striped bucket on the front porch. There was also a note above the bucket, and I could already guess that it instructed that you take a few pieces of candy and be on your way. But I was always cautious, ever weary. I told him to stay on the sidewalk, and I walked up to the front porch. I picked up the note. It read, "If no one should answer when you ring the bell, please take a candy, and I wish you well." There were no windows that I could subtly peer into, but the house on the outside was perfectly presentable. The porch was clean, the lawn crisply cut and clearly maintained. I peered inside the bucket, and my eyes lit up. Even as an adult, I knew that full-size chocolate bars were rare, but there they were. Snickers, Mars, O. Henry. All of the classics in full-sized glory. I was so excited for Leo. I turned around and went back to the sidewalk, where he was practically brimming with energy. Even after a long night like this one, he was raring to go. I put on my best pirate voice. "All right, Captain, the note says to knock on the door, and if no one answers, you can take one of the treats from the bucket. Just one though, okay? Make it fair for the other children." "I mean, matey," he said back in his best pirate voice. We gave each other a fist pump. He walked up the pathway to the front door. I made sure to watch him the whole way. It could be another setup. Some clever house owners putting together an elaborate ruse to get the children's guard down before they reveal the big scare. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. No doubt it was a text message from my wife. I watched as my son knocked on the door and patiently waited. We agreed before the night began that if nobody answered within 10 seconds, then it was time to move on. I remember every detail of those next 10 seconds. 1. I took my phone out of my pocket, still keeping an eye on Leo. 2. I entered the code in without looking at the phone, unlocking the screen. 3. Leo was still waiting at the door. 4. Through muscle memory, I brought up the new messages screen, still not taking my eyes off my son. 5. He began to turn around. 6. He started to head towards the bucket left on the front porch. 7. He smiled at me. 8. I glanced down at my phone. Sent. You. And the captain okay? 9. Reply, on our way home. 10. Leo was gone. I didn't register it at first. I figured he was hiding behind something. Leo. I called out. Leo. There was no reply. I ran up to the porch, but I found nothing. No clue as to where he had gone. There was no way he could have run around the house. Not in the span of 1 to 2 seconds. No way. I looked up and down the street, but there was no one. No parents, No kids, nobody. Did someone open the door? Was he inside? I started to pound furiously on the front door, screaming my son's name. I was screaming at the top of my lungs as I tugged at the door handle, trying to get it open. I must have screamed loud enough because the woman whose house Leo was so brave it opened her door and yelled after me. Is everything all right? No. Have you seen my son? The little boy dressed as a captain? Oh my goodness. No, I haven't. Should I call someone? Call someone. His cell phone. I smacked myself in the forehead. I forgot he had one on him. I grabbed the phone out of my pocket and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. I almost threw the phone away right then and there, but I tried to calm myself down. Tried to think back. But all I could picture was some thing opening the door, grabbing my son and covering his mouth before he could scream for me. I dialed 911. I didn't care if we found him later, if he was playing some trick on me. I just wanted him back. I told the neighbor to grab a flashlight and help me look for him. When the cops arrived, the neighbor and I had been looking all around the house, trying to find a way in. I was about to break a window when I heard the sirens. Those wailing screams echoing in the distance. I took such comfort in those sirens. I just knew in my heart that as soon as they got here, my son would pop out of somewhere. Tell me it was all a big joke. I wouldn't scold him. I wouldn't yell at him. I would just hug and squeeze and hold on to him until he left for college. I told the cops everything, down to the exact detail, as I remembered it. They also pounded on the door, but when they saw my frantic behavior, the impatience riddling my body, they went ahead and broke the door in. They told me to stay behind, let them clear the house. I wanted to protest, to scream at them, to tell them nothing could keep me away. But when they drew their guns and yelled into the house, I knew they were taking this seriously. 5 of the longest minutes of my life passed by. I don't know when she did it, but at one point I looked down and the neighbor was holding my hand. She had children of her own. She knew what was happening, what could be happening. When the 2 cops came out of the house, the look on their faces said it all. I almost broke down there on the street, but I had to hold on a little longer. I tore into the house, past the outstretched arms of the officers, and started yelling for my son, bursting in and out of each room with ferocious intent. It wasn't until I went up the stairs into what was once a bedroom that I realized no one was living in this house. No one had been living in this house for years. I ran down the stairs, almost knocking the officers down as I ran up to the woman, the helpful neighbor. I grabbed her and started yelling. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me no one was living here? She started to stammer, taken aback by my sudden turn, my aggression towards her. I didn't know. I've only lived on this street for a few months. I never saw anyone come in or out, but that could be for 100 different reasons. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I stood there on the street, breathing heavily, holding onto the shoulders of a woman I only met a few minutes before. The officers placed their hands on my arms, and I released her. I looked back at the house, that 2-story monstrosity bathed in darkness, and I knew. However impossible it was, I knew right there and then. Leo wasn't coming back. Part 2. Things for me were dark, really dark, for many months afterwards. I don't really remember all of the police searches, the news bulletins, the press conferences. I ignored the pitted looks of my friends, the suspicious glares of my neighbors. My wife and I, despite everything, remained strong together. Every night we told each other, no body, no death. In our hearts, Leo was alive. The initial investigation of the house amounted to almost nothing. The previous owner had declared bankruptcy and abandoned the house. The bank hadn't been able to sell it to anyone, so it sat there collecting dust. No one could account for the maintained lawn out front, and the police never found any bucket full of chocolate bars or any note. I don't care what they say, I know what I saw. I know there were some on the police force that suspected me. I went through rigorous interrogations, but they came up with nothing, as I knew they would. I didn't blame them. If I had been in their position, I would have suspected me as well. After 3 months, all things concerning Leo dissipated, except for in our household. We still put out flyers all over the surrounding neighborhoods every week. We still kept up to date with social media, pleading anybody and everybody to keep an eye out for our boy. I drained my accounts hiring private detectives to look into the house, the neighborhood, anything that I thought could help. They all came up with nothing. No clues. No traces. Leo had simply vanished. Every night, I had the same nightmare. Someone knocks on the door to our house, and I race down, hoping against all hope that it's Leo. And every time I open the door, it is Leo, and he's standing there in his pirate uniform and his pumpkin candy carrier. I scream out in joy and grab a hold of him, except his flesh starts to melt and sift through my fingers. His body turns into sand, and suddenly my son is a pile of dust and dirt on the carpet. Then I wake up. 2 weeks ago, I was on the couch in the afternoon, staring at the ceiling when I heard a knock on the door. I got up slowly, thinking it was a reporter coming to do a follow-up, or some punk kid claiming to have seen my son, something that happened all too often. I opened the door and nearly screamed. Not in joy, but in sheer terror. My son was standing there. Leo. My wife came barreling down the stairs, and she screamed as well, but hers was all happiness. She pushed me out of the way and took Leo up in her arms. I couldn't move. I kept waiting for his body to turn into mush, his ashes spilling through my wife's fingers. I kept waiting to wake up in my bed, sweating and crying. But that didn't happen. Against every single odd in the book, Leo had been returned. Through all the crying and hugging and kissing, Leo didn't say a word. He was just there, no expression on his face, nothing registering in his eyes. We put down a shock. Clearly something had happened to him. As each day passed, not a single doctor or therapist or police officer could find anything physically wrong with him. Everything should be in working order, said one particularly pompous doctor after examining Leo. I can't tell you where your son was or what happened to him, but whatever happened, nothing is wrong with him on the outside. Nothing was wrong with him on the outside. I nearly knocked out that smiling white coat right there and then, but I was so elated to have Leo back that I shrugged it off, ignored it. Nothing mattered anymore. Leo was home. Later that night, I was sitting at the dinner table after having tucked Leo in when I came to the sudden realization that I wasn't exactly happy. I should have been. I should have been screaming over the rooftops with complete joy in my heart. But something was wrong. Leo wasn't Leo anymore. That happy, brave boy had come back, different. I tried to think about why. Obviously, it had something to do with where he had been, what had happened to him. But there was something else, something nagging at the back of my neck. Then with a cold, sinking feeling, I remembered. Leo had said something when I tucked him in. He had whispered, "I like it here." I didn't register at the time, but sitting at the table, I didn't like it. What did that mean? I ran up the stairs and opened his door. He was sleeping just as he should have been. I almost laughed out loud. What was wrong with me? My son was home. That's all that mattered. A few nights ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to see Leo standing in the doorway. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there. I looked over at my wife, but she was sleeping. I turned back to Leo. "Hey there, Captain. Are you okay?" He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me and smiled, and for a second my blood turned cold. My flesh raced. That smile wasn't my son. Then he whispered something. I couldn't hear it. What was that? I asked him. Then he sprinted towards me. So fast, so quick, and he yelled, "I like it here." Then he ran back out of our room and into his, slamming his door. My wife slept through the whole thing. Last night was the turning point. I was just about to lock the front door for the evening when my wife started screaming. And I mean screaming. I was convinced in the few seconds it took me to bound up the stairs that someone was killing her. In a way, I was right. I burst through the bedroom door to find Leo standing over my wife with an axe. He had that dead smile on his face again. The axe was raised above his head when I tackled him. He started to scream, and I started to cry. He just kept repeating the same thing over and over again. "You like it there? You like it there? You like it there?" Now I'm lost. I don't know what to do, who to turn to. And as Halloween approaches, I think I have to go back. Back to the house where it all began. I'm going to take Leo. Maybe he can show me where he wants us to go. the shadow counselor. When I, Leo, was 12, I came to the conclusion that everyone in the world, including my own family, was against me. I was never a problem child, but my parents sure treated me like one. For example, I used to need to be home by 5 p.m. every day. This clearly restricted my amount of playtime outdoors. I wasn't allowed to have friends over to play at the house, nor was I allowed to go over anyone else's. I had to finish homework directly after I came home from school, no matter how long it took. My parents refused to buy me video games and forced me to read books and then write a book report on them to prove I actually read it. Now, even though those rules listed above were quite frustrating to me as a child, they aren't what upset me most. What really hurt me was the lack of compassion on behalf of my parents. My mother was a bitter woman who always made me feel guilty about accidents or mistakes I've made. My father only knew one emotion: frustration. The only time he spoke to me was when he screamed at me for receiving poor test scores or beat me for misbehaving. But enough about them. Let's talk about my school psychologist. For his own privacy, we will call him Dr. Alistair. Like most junior high schools, a psychologist is always available on campus during school hours to assist any students in need of counseling, whether it is emotional, academic, social, behavioral, etc. To be honest, I have never seen any students talking with Dr. Alistair. Every day, I would walk past his office on my way to the cafeteria and peek through his door's little window. He would always be alone in there, working on some paperwork. I guess that most kids were too afraid to speak about their problems to an adult who was practically a stranger. For this reason, it took me 3 weeks to muster enough courage to go into his office. March 2nd, 1993 was the day I decided to voice my troubles to Dr. Alistair. During lunch break, I stood in front of his office door and knocked. Through the window, I could see him raise his head, smile, and motion for me to come in. I did. He greeted me by introducing himself and asking for my name. Dr. Alistair was a very soft-spoken man who seemed to radiate kindness. In less than 30 minutes, I rambled to Dr. Alistair about how mean my parents were to me and how they didn't care about me at all. After a while, my voice began to quiver and I stopped speaking. The psychologist listened patiently to my whole spiel, arms folded and head nodding. I half expected him to begin talking about how everything I had just said was untrue and that my parents loved me dearly and blah blah blah. But he didn't. Dr. Alistair leaned towards me with a grin on his face and said, "You know, I'm the best school psychologist in the world. I promise we will fix this." I rolled my eyes. "Okay, but how?" I asked. "I have my ways," he replied. "I'm a man of my word. I promise that within just 1 month, the relationship between you and your parents will change for the better. Forever." After a brief pause, he continued, "Although, I do need you to make me a promise. You have to promise me that you'll come back to my office after school tomorrow, and that you won't tell anyone that we had this conversation today. It'll be our little secret." I promised. The following day, I returned to Dr. Alistair after school. It was around 4 p.m. when I entered his office. After a warm welcome, he asked me to have a seat in front of his desk once again. Upon sitting down, I watched Dr. Alistair close the blinds of the door's tiny window. "There," he smiled. "Now we have all the privacy we need." We began to talk about my likes and interests, my favorite subjects in school, my least favorite teachers, and things of the like. About an hour into the conversation, Dr. Alistair offered me a soft drink. I gladly took the offer, considering my parents never allowed me to drink soda. Dr. Alistair reached over to his mini fridge and fidgeted around before setting down 2 open cans of soda on the desk. Afterwards, we continued to talk about what was going on in my life, but it wasn't long before I passed out from whatever drugs Dr. Alistair placed in my drink. It took me a minute or so to adjust my blurred vision upon waking, and when it did, I had no idea what to think. I was handcuffed to a bed and my mouth was sealed with duct tape. I immediately began to panic, squirming and tugging at the cuffs, but gave up soon after. My eyes widened in disbelief after looking around the room. There were posters of superheroes pinned up along the walls and photographs of famous athletes on shelves. In the middle of the room was an old television and Super Nintendo, various game cartridges stacked alongside it. I didn't know what to think. Here I am in a room filled with items most kids would die to play with. I would have probably cried from joy hadn't I been handcuffed to a bed frame. My stomach sank once again as the door opened and Dr. Alastair walked inside. He sat down on the edge of the bed. "Now listen," he said. "Remember that I'm here to help you, and I would never hurt you, okay?" Dr. Alastair gently removed the tape from my mouth and then the cuffs from my hands. My first instinct was to begin crying, but something about Dr. Alastair made me feel safe. He smiled at me. "You're going to be staying here for a while," he continued. "And during this time, you're allowed to play with any toys in this room while I'm here at home. But when I leave the house, I'll need to cuff one of your hands back to the bed. You can still watch the television, but I want you to only watch the news channels when I'm away." I sat in silence, still trying to process the information he had given me. "So," Dr. Alastair yipped, slapping me on the knee, "you go ahead and knock yourself out. I'll be back when it's time for dinner." He got up from the bed, walked across the room, and clicked the TV's power button before locking the door behind him. Several more minutes passed before I realized that Dr. Alastair wasn't joking. All that was left for me to do was boot up the Nintendo and play Mario until nightfall. At about 7 p.m., Dr. Alastair returned to the room carrying 2 plates of mashed potatoes and chicken strips. I finally gathered up the courage to ask him how long I'd be staying in this room. "Well, about a month," he replied. "Give or take a few weeks. I just have some work I need to do." The following morning, I awoke to Dr. Alastair's hand patting my head. "Hey, bud, you don't have to wake up right now if you don't want, but I'm going to need to put this back on," he whispered, clamping the cold steel handcuff onto my wrist. I gazed up at him. He was wearing a collared shirt and slacks, a coat draped over his shoulder, and a suitcase at his side. He looked just how he always did when I saw him around school. Before leaving, he placed the TV's remote next to me and told me to turn it on and watch the news. The first thing I saw upon turning it on was a breaking news segment. An important-looking police officer stood at a podium surrounded by people with microphones. I happened to begin viewing halfway through his speech. A statewide Amber Alert has been issued as of this morning. We have several investigators working towards identifying potential abductors, but as of right now, there is not much evidence. Faculty members state that the boy had been last seen around 4 or 5 in the evening on Dash. I began to feel nauseous as a photograph of me appeared on the screen. It was my yearbook picture from last year. Captions for the photograph displayed my name and age, my school, and my town. Above my picture were alternating titles. FBI begins search for child. Kidnapping suspect unknown, and potential runaway. The live footage continued, and 2 figures I soon recognized as my mom and dad stepped up to the podium. Both appeared to have reddened eyes. Tears streamed down my mother's face as she took hold of a microphone. I'd never seen so much emotion come from my mother before as she wept on live television, stuttering on sentences such as, "Please return my baby back to me," and "I'm so sorry," and "Please come home to us." When my father took the microphone, I nearly expected his attitude to be stone cold, but he too had tears in his eyes. He pleaded to the world to bring his son home safely and lastly begged for my forgiveness. I know I haven't been the best father, but goddamn it do I wish I had been now. Please bring my boy back. I turned the power off shortly after. My emotions were mixed, for I had never once seen my father cry. I felt miserable that my parents were being put through so much, but at the same time, I felt relief. I now know how much mom and dad love me. Nearly 4 weeks have passed, and Dr. Alastair has been treating me with the utmost respect. He leaves me in the morning cuffed to the bed frame, but returns in the afternoon to eat lunch and dinner with me, talk, and play games. I never would have guessed how good Dr. Alastair was at Monopoly and Scrabble. But one morning, when Dr. Alastair woke me before heading off to work, I noticed a stern look on his face. I also realized that it was 3 hours earlier than when he usually wakes me. You need to watch the news today. No exceptions. I want you to keep the television on all day and pay close attention to it, he stated grimly. I, of course, complied and watched him exit the room. About 2 hours later, a breaking news segment interrupted the toothpaste commercial I was watching. The title, Human Remnants Found. 2 staunch-looking men in suits stood aside one another and began speaking. We are displeased to bring up such unfortunate news this morning regarding our missing child case from earlier this month. One of the men bowed his head while the one speaking shuffled through some papers. He continued, "Remains of a body have been found in a garbage bag beneath a highway overpass. The body appears to be that of a child, although not much of it is left. The body has been decapitated and much has been burnt to ash and bone." The screen shifted over to a helicopter view of the freeway. Dozens of police cars gathered near the bottom of a tall overpass. The man's voice could still be heard. Within the bag, police found a junior high school identification card labeled as such. The screen showed the school ID card I always kept in my backpack. The plastic was sort of melted away, but my photograph and name were intact. After the 2 men dismissed themselves, the camera panned over to my parents. They were sitting among reporters. My mother's face held a painful grimace, and my father sulked his head down at his knees. I shut the television off. Dr. Alistair returned home very late. He hurried into the room, unlocked my cuffs, and placed a bottle of fizzing water into my hand. He placed his hands on my shoulders and smiled. "I made you a promise, didn't I?" I nodded, tears squeezing their way out my eyes. "You need to make me a promise again," he whispered. He told me that I needed to drink all the water in the bottle. It would help me sleep, and that from here on, I'm never to tell anyone that I ever met him. I promised. I told you I'm the best school psychologist in the world, didn't I? And he was right. I awoke later that night to find myself lying in the middle of a park, stars shining brilliantly across the night sky. I recognized the park. It wasn't too far from my school. A mile or so down the road, I saw my house. The lights were off inside, but I could make out my father sitting on the step leading to the front door. I hesitantly called out to him. He lifted his head slowly, but when he saw it was me, he sprang to his feet, ran towards me arms open, yelling my name. My mother erupted from the house behind him. Dr. Alistair was right. Things have changed with my family and I. My parents smile more often and treat me lovingly. I cannot ask for a more perfect ending. Every now and then, I see Dr. Alistair on campus, walking to and from his office. Rarely do we ever make eye contact, let alone speak to one another, but sometimes he'll shoot me a wink and a smile. I'll always keep my promise to him and pretend I never met him, but there will always be one question forever floating in my mind. Who did Dr. Alistair decapitate and throw off the overpass?
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.